Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. This evening, I would like to speak about language's re-emergence. And how, at least through my own narrative, through my own approach, I have perceived that every ideological system requires an power archetype, requires a champion to their moment. What that means is an ideological system, if we think of it that it's not just people that are trying to survive, ideas that are trying to survive as well. The idea has a strong point and a weak point. That means imagine when someone explains to you something, that is a design. Okay, that is like, imagine every concept I'm explaining is like an invention, and so that invention has certain parts of it that are, you can say they are like more prone to pressure. When you look at an ideological system or any system, it's not that all parts of the system are the same. I mean, when looking at the ocean, for example, yes, you know, it's as if we're different waves in an energetic ocean. But when you look at the system of design and form and you find an appreciation to the shape of life, you begin to acknowledge the design of the system, and with the design, the narrative that it centers around. I feel just like an object with a big mass has a center of gravity, as it was thought. Similarly, I think any system of influence has a center of ideology, and that center of ideology is the power. It's the archetype of power. It's kind of like trying to see the greatest warrior of every nation and realizing every nation you can find some great warrior in it, you know? The archetypes are there. The value of the concept, even archetypes, is, I can say, as valuable as creating an alphabet for the personality of the human being. That was Carl Jung's genius, really, when he came up with the idea of archetypes. What it was he was reverse engineering. He was looking at how a word is made of letters. He was looking at the story of the individual and noticed that the individual seems to be animating itself in its inner realms in accordance to different events and different situations. So that means in front of your eyes, yes, you may appear a simple biological being, but behind your eyes, the way this biological being is keeping to itself is very multivarious, you know. For a second, guys, that bird sounded like a squirrel. Squirrels fighting birds. And what I want to point out is that we tend to look at ourselves as part of a system, but we are occurring simultaneously with the whole cosmic system of things. And so the archetypes and the values of them is trying to see what letters you're made up of. Right now, believe it or not, in this talk or any time I speak or any time I communicate, what is occurring in the inner realms, that every word has its own respective memory. What does that mean? That means this word I said right now, you know? Just saying the word now, that word evokes the last memory used with the concept. And it's different. It's not necessarily just the last. For example, when I think of an apple, I don't think about the last time I ate an apple. I think about, for example, a memory of my childhood when my grandfather gave me an apple. You know, like a ripe apple. In a talk I gave a couple days ago, I developed an incredible concept I consider. I consider I'm an early bird and maybe the first person ever to do it. I was looking at the idea of the atom, dear listener. I was looking at how easily we look at this world and we're like, it's made of particles. And yeah, those particles are made of different particles. And I was looking at psychology and I was looking at physics and I was looking at the practice of neurology and how are we animating the neural activity? How are we, just like letters, we call that letter A, how are we calling that part of the brain that? You know? And so the question comes that is the mind dependent on its individual variables, or is the mind activity occurring as a collective phenomenon? Traditional, and you can say at this point in 2020, archaic psychology saw the human brain divided between hemispheres. But a divided man is no use for either of the worlds that he's divided in. For the greatest use is witnessing the value of your life. So I looked at the concept of the atom, I looked at the concept of psychology and the psychology of the human being, and I'm like, why are philosophers so easily banished? You know? Scientists don't want to listen to philosophers because the philosopher is considering something that is of no consideration to the scientist. But regardless of what level of scientific activity the person has, don't. Don't. Sorry guys, I'll be back. Just hang on. Okay guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. Sorry guys, I got distracted by something. Now I gotta catch my train of thought again. What was I saying? I mean, just the study of power archetypes. Uh, they exist in any. Oh yeah, I remember the Ventum. So pretty much, I was looking at the concept of physics and the neurological behavior of the human being, and I was looking at the concept of psychology, and I wondered what is the smallest particle of a psychology, and then I got inspired to create a word, create a couple new words that I don't think have ever existed, and the concept was that I looked at the smallest unit of matter, and we can call that an atom, basically. Sorry guys, I'm talking outside. It's a Saturday, you know, and it's 9:30 p.m. I can't. It's not that late, so I don't know if the neighbor's just outside or it's because of me. Imagine the neighbor complains about noise, and I'm like, "Hey man, have you heard of this YouTube channel?" Anyways, guys, I created this concept. I called it the eventum. I saw the smallest unit of the psychological being is an event, and really the human being is a coagulation of various events in their life. You know, what your memories are is they are event-packed incidents. And an event means there's a self and a world. So you don't just have memories of yourself, you have memories of every world you have been as a self. Every moment you have been a self in, and the respective world of that self, you know. So I called the term, I saw that the psychology of the human being, it's the smallest way it can be summarized, the smallest unit of it is an event. And I noticed that the smallest unit of matter we're calling atom. So I created the term eventum. Okay. And then I considered that an eventum is the smallest unit of psychology. Now, this small particle in psychology, the eventum, it has, like the proton and the neutron inside an atom, it has the eventron. I created the term the eventron. And so it's a negatively charged, instead of having traditional science, though, in regards to creating a new word such as the neutron and the proton, I felt keeping the neutron the same. So both traditions have a neutron, both the eventum has a neutron, and the atom has a neutron. And but then in regards to the electron, the eventum has an eventron. And instead of a proton, it's a negative. It's a positively charged eventron, and it's a negatively charged eventron. So that was the idea, that behind our eyes we experience existence as an event. In front of our eyes we exist as a physical experience. We are multidimensional beings. There is something very significant about this and the realization of this, regardless of whoever you are. Because when you realize you're multidimensional, you stop acting as if your inner realm is a perfect system. And you notice that your inner realm gives you a certain range of information of how the world is constituted. And if you're selfless, you can learn from other selves. So power is an event. It's the resolution of events. And you know what's fascinating? When light check this out. When light hits an atom, it changes the charge of the electron. Sorry, it doesn't change the charge of the electron. What am I saying? It changes. It makes the electron move up to a higher circle. It energizes. It influences the atom, makes the electron go in, the electron moves up to a higher state of energy. So what that means is light is information. Life has an influence. That means that moment when the person, I tried this once, I mean, honestly, I noticed it from my coffee. I had a cup of coffee in the sunlight and I looked at it and I saw incredible geometrical patterns, right? Then I looked at the palm of my hand and I looked at all the lines and I saw it's as if like all the days, everything that has influence, it's as if the sun has also influenced the hand, you know? Anyways, guys, I think it's raining. I'm going to go inside. I'll be back. Okay, guys. Relocation successful. Seems like the weather also wanted me to go inside. The whole point of power is man to comprehend nature's mind so he doesn't break. This world does have a mind. I feel that there's an inseparability of all individual activity simultaneously with the whole cosmic occurrence. The healthiest way to look at life is to see something as unknown and then notice the various known dimensions added on. That means when I look at something, I don't have the expectation to understand it at first. At first, I don't have any conclusion of trying to understand something or find it to be valid or invalid. At first, I look at the phenomena. And then I look at the phenomena in such a way where there's no longer someone looking, there's no longer an idea looking at a phenomena, and then that is a sort of emotional permission. So do you see what I'm saying here? I'm saying that our attention is where the show is happening. This show that every person in history has said, the show must go on, the show must go on. You know, what is this show? It is an event of attention, the simultaneity of an object projecting a subject and a subject being able to project new objective variations of itself, because the mind is actually creating renditions of the body before making a decision. And it's not, when I say create, I would say evoke. For me, it's strange. It's as if the world is like an ocean of different colors of paint, and then existence is like the paintbrush in this ocean of paint. And wherever the paintbrush moves, it gets defined by that color, and the person has that ability. There was something that you see it, but you don't really understand its metaphysical implication. You see it in these. I've seen it in certain Japanese comic shows that have been the Japanese comics that have been turned into shows, but the whole idea is that the character evokes power out of the moment. The character either shouts something or says something, and there's an evocation of power, then there's a rhythmic movement with that power. And I've always wondered that human beings have been able to wield many kinds of weapons. You know how many people have held hammers, axes, swords in history, and even guns? You know? But what is that ultimate weapon that we have not yet held in our hand? And I realize it's the relationship of the mind with the elemental world. That means, believe it or not, we are reaching a point of objective and subjective analysis of our moment, where now we're wondering about the constitution of the elements of reality beyond our first immediate linear analysis. For me, there is no rational and irrational. Let me tell you why. There is, of course, the discrimination between them, but I'm saying, the reason I'm saying there isn't, because both are angles. Both are angles of perception. One relates more to the material outcome. One relates more to how fluid the inner realm is. That means something that I've seen many theists and atheists debate, and the atheist is like literally slapping the past in the face, backhanding the past in the face, you know? And the past, the theist is trying to literally, like a martial artist, defend it with philosophy. You know what it is? Philosophy is like the hilarious middle brother. Do you know? You can say philosophy is the hilarious middle child, where the young child and the big child are fighting. Do you know? And so the middle child is there, and both of them are looking at the middle child, and it's like, you see this, right? That person started, you see? For me, the thing about religion is both of the ideological systems, one choosing to see the causal point of reality emerging as mind, one seeing the causal point of reality emerging as matter. Pretty much the theist-atheist difference, I find. So this idea, it was as if I had never seen a theist say that, if it, like the atheist would say, you're a temporary being, you shouldn't believe in abstraction that doesn't accord to reality. Do you know? And that has no contributing value to reality. So the atheist is saying, in a collective way, religion doesn't make sense, in the sense that if to have church and state united. Do you know? Like, it doesn't make sense. Some nations have graduated from this. Some nations on the planet haven't. The nation I was born in hasn't, for example. That means 6th century law is also infused with the modern political laws of the nation. Do you know? That means, imagine you still thinking when, like, you were 6 years old. You know, now you're in your 30s, but imagine you're thinking like you're 6 years old. You know? Well, that's how the political system of some countries feel, where their ideology, like, it's strange. It's as if modern people are living in a nation that is judging them based on ancient values. You know? So anyways, I was wondering, this is the thing I want to say, that I have yet to see the theist look at the atheist and be like, buddy, if you're telling me I'm temporary, then why shouldn't I believe it? Because if you think life is temporary, if it's meaningless, then the person is free to have any dimension of meaning. You see the issue? We can't nullify it and we can't infinitize it. We have to build a dualistic, the gears of civilization, of an advanced civilization, you can say is duality, but its outcome is an endless advancement. It's not even purely singular. That means you'll see, if you get if you put 10 people in a room and you're like, all right, 10 people in a room, now all of you be oneness. All of you be oneness right now. You know, after being oneness for like weeks and weeks and weeks, they'll be like, okay, we're different people. All right, you know? We'd want to step out of the oneness. It's not human to be in it. That Taoistic oneness is not for human. Enlightenment is not for a person. It's for a presence. Little was this said. So the extreme of oneness is the void. The extreme of duality is in the infinite. And human beings are choosing various ways to walk. But if you can realize that your consciousness, right now, your mind, the Yoga Patanjali Sutras gave us a great clue. They said it's like a glass orb. Imagine your attention right now is a glass orb moving on different colored surfaces. You know, that means there's so many cultural arguments, you know. On some level, we want freedom of speech. On another level, everybody's chasing a specific truth. How precious. how you know, convenient. You know, we're 8 billion. We have everybody has different DNA, but we're all seeking the same truth. Like, it doesn't get sillier than that, you know? You know, it's like, the thing is, it's a co-creation, massive co-creation. And civilization right now is being defined mainly by its physical components, then its static physical components, then its dynamic abstract components, you know? Okay, so guys, Dan in the chat section says something interesting. He says a fun term I learned for an attention before labels is pre-intellectual awareness. Yeah, but let me tell you something. I would say pre-intellectual consciousness, not awareness, because the difference between awareness and consciousness is awareness is unconditional, consciousness is conditional. I mean, no, technically it makes sense what you say. Pre-intellectual, pre-intellect awareness. Yeah. No, you're right, Dan. I would agree with you. I've called it pre-thought. Literally, I had a memory before I learned language, so I'm like, yeah, there's definitely stuff going on before we learn language, you know? You know, today, guys, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee before the stock, hours before the stock. And I was just looking. Sometimes I look without looking at anything. I look for the look, for the view. Sometimes in moments when it's like in movement, you can, to some degree, work with the outer realms easily. But the inner realms, you got to work through stillness. And stillness has no agenda. That means, can you imagine a state of mind where the condition of being relates to nothing linear or abstract? That means neither imagination, neither reality. I'm going to share with you a chapter from a science fiction. I mean, I've decided to make it into a book, but I wrote it as the skeleton of the story. So I'm going to tell you this is a sci-fi work of mine. It's called The Lords of Chaos, and it's incomplete, and it's one of the most sophisticated metaphysical works I've written. because I gave myself a certain freedom to do something in this book that is very strange to who I am now. So I'll tell you what it is. The book is called The Lords of Chaos. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because there's a part of it, just, I'm going to say this in case if I forget the checkpoint. A progression through various modalities of what life, how life could be fragmented. Just keep that in mind. I'm trying to I'm sharing this as a moral of the story being a fragmentation of the psyche in its evolution, a certain phase of it. So, anyways, the Lords of Chaos. I'm going to go into a sci-fi tunnel right now. This is how the scene would begin if it was a movie. This is how I saw it in my inner realms. There is a being named Kronos. He is the Lord of Chaos. He's pretty much in this universe I've created. There's a Lord of Chaos and there's a Lord of Order and their siblings. And the whole universe is based on them. You know? Now, in regards to so the story begins with Kronos hovering in the middle of space, and it's like you would imagine as a close-up from a palm of a hand of this cosmic being, and there are three colored spheres moving in this being's hand. As the camera, imagine, goes closer, you begin to see those three spheres in his hand are planets, and one of them is Earth, and they're red, green, and blue. The blue one is like Earth, you know? And so what happens is that Kronos is there with two of his disciples. And he's the Lord of Chaos, and he's not a human being, he's a cosmic being. These are cosmic level beings. Usually stories begin with creatures on Earth. I decided to create a story where it's beginning with the Lord of the cosmos, Lord of the chaotic dimension of the cosmos, teaching his disciples. So the Lord, and chaos doesn't necessarily mean evil in this book. It just means different from order. Now, the Lord of Chaos has these three spheres in his hand. His two disciples are there. I don't remember the exact dialogue. Oh my God, if I find this email, no way I can find this email right now. If I find this email, I can read it for you. With a detail and story that I can't remember possibly now. It's like, I think I'm one of the very few people in the world who's searching in his emails, Lord of Chaos. And guys, this Lord of Chaos, this sci-fi universe I've created, it has nothing to do with our understanding of chaos from this earth. It's not archetypal to anything here. So, damn, it's not here. It's not here. Shit. Maybe not this email. Let me see. Hang in there, folks. This is worth the wait. Sorry, it was called Lords of Chaos. I remember. I can't find it. Damn. One more place to check. Come on. Oh, I think I found it. Oh, no. Something else. I bring shame to this moment. I can't find it. Okay, whatever. Alright guys, I'm going to continue. I'm going to tell you as much of it as I can accurately remember. Kronos looks at his disciples, the Lord of Chaos. He looks at his two disciples, I forget their names. He looks at them and he says, now I will teach you a teaching, a secret teaching to my two disciples. He's telling them, I will teach you a secret teaching called the Apocalypse Bringer. So the Lord of Chaos is teaching his two disciples, and they're like cosmic beings hovering in the middle of space, you know, and completely unfathomable higher dimensions. And so as they are hovering in there, the Lord of Chaos says, I will teach you. The whole point of him being there with the two disciples is he's teaching them a technique where I don't know the year, but I wrote every I don't know, billions of years he would teach it. You know, it was a secret teaching that only he would teach a few of his disciples. Only one other disciple had yet taught it to, you know. And so the way he begins is he's teaching it to his two disciples, and he chooses one of the orbs in his hands, one of the spheres, and that's the world he's decided to bring an apocalypse to for the teaching. The next thing you see is the Lord of Chaos appear beside Earth, beside a planet that looks like Earth. I don't know which orb it was, if it was the blue or green one he chooses. But he chooses one of the orbs. Suddenly he's beside the atmosphere of the planet above, like in space. You can imagine like where satellites would be. Kronos and his two disciples are. And he's like, now I will teach you this secret technique, this apocalypse technique. And what he does, he is the Lord of Chaos. He's the most able being of the dimension, of the chaotic dimension. He's the god of chaos, pretty much. And what he does is instantly he takes his two disciples and puts them in his eyes, where his disciples are looking from inside his eyes. And he goes instantly into the earth, and there's this girl walking in the street, somewhere that looks like Earth. This very beautiful girl is just walking, young girl is like, you know, late 20s or something, but she's walking, and suddenly this Lord of Chaos comes inside, like a sort of, the Lord of Chaos goes inside her eyes. So it's kind of strange. The disciples are in the Lord of Chaos's eyes. The Lord of Chaos goes inside the body of this girl. Then everything freezes for the girl. The ground underneath her, she freezes. The whole planet gets destroyed. Everything around this girl gets completely destroyed except the little chunk of land right underneath her feet. She witnesses her whole planet in front of her eyes get destroyed. The most intense chaos. And she's left there on a little piece of land, her footing, in the middle of space, and then that also gets destroyed, and she stops existing. And the next scene you see, suddenly everything of that universal sector stopped existing, even the girl. And the girl's eyes were just filled with tears of just unfathomable chaos, you know? Now here's when the main part of the story begins, okay? The next scene is there is no girl, nothing. Kronos returns into where the atmosphere they were before, and he takes out the two disciples who through his eyes had seen through the eyes of the girl. And as the two disciples are there and they're honoring like Lord Kronos, giving them the inner vision of the technique, what happens is suddenly something... Suddenly in that moment, Lord Kronos sees something approaching from where the planet was. And it's the soul of that crying girl. And Lord Kronos, the god of chaos, he looks, Lord of chaos, he sees this and he gets shocked because he knows everything. But he's seeing for him, like as if for the Lord of chaos, this is a supernatural event. Do you know? And so the Lord of Chaos sees this girl crying, this ethereal soul of this girl just crying and walking towards them. In that instant, he pushes his disciples into a different dimension in space. And he's alone with the girl. And he looks at her and he says, "Hey, can you see me?" And the girl says yes, and she cries. And then it's in that moment where in this story, Kronos, the Lord of Chaos, decides to adopt this girl as his daughter. So what happens is suddenly he brings out his two disciples and he declares them, and he says, this girl, the soul of the girl he went to use the apocalypse technique, he says, this is my daughter. Do you know? He declares it, and this part is so next level, where because he's the Lord of Chaos, he's the God of the dimension, he instantly creates an incredible body, beautiful body for her, do you know? And then puts the palm of his hand on her forehead and imbues her millions of years of knowledge. Millions of years, to the levels that the disciples are shocked. They as beings have been for eons trying to get to this point, but this random soul which Kronos has decided to adopt as his daughter instantly is imbued with the wisdom. And she suddenly awakens, and I can't remember the name. I can't remember the name I gave her. But anyways, so as Kronos does this, the whole phase of the book is she doesn't know. At the end of the book, I could tell you, she becomes the Lord of Chaos. And the next thing you see is she has gone, but this time she doesn't, she's using the apocalypse technique, but she goes and hugs the person. Do you know what I mean? Instead of going through her eyes and letting the world become apocalyptic, you know? And there's something even, so what happens is after she gets the body, they all have to journey back to the highest dimension. And what happens is she has to go through multiple lifetimes. She has to go through obstacles of being an oversoul. She has to literally be the sky for a planet to get to there. It's like some next level stuff. But I don't remember how I wrote it. I wrote it way better than I'm telling you, you know? With a totally different rhythm, I wrote it. And there's a part where the Lord of Chaos, before at the end he has to leave, he has to literally, before the girl becomes the Lord of Chaos, what happens is the Lord of Chaos goes to meet his brother. And this part I thought of bring a comedic angle to the story where his brother is being a prophet on some planet. Do you know? And in the middle of the prophet, suddenly Kronos appears and he's like, bro, can I talk to you for a second? And the Lord of Order, his brother, is like, can't you see I'm trying to trying to give a divine message here, man? You know, like some sort of humor there. You know? Of course, guys, for a storyteller, the story is alive in ways that words can only dream of. In regards to the inner realms, I mean. So that was the idea. I have thought about mythology. I have thought about what is, if the world, if all knowledge in the world could be an alphabet, what would it be? You know? One thing I thought of doing is that I'm like, instead of the child, in the young primary school child, instead of being like A is for apple, the child should be is like A is for astrophysics. You know? Like B is for building. Do you know what I mean? Like, instead of simple primitive symbols, it's like we can let the child know what's going on a bit earlier, but in a more gentle context, in a more design oriented context. Anything that, whether in the outer realms or in the inner realms, it comes to me and it overwhelms me. That means it doesn't matter if it's some external event that overwhelms me or if it's some internal event that overwhelms me. Whenever there's an overwhelmment, I notice that the unknown is moving in a way where I am not aware of it. So in those moments, I become simple. I can't tell you how many situations I have diffused by being simpler than the situation. That's it. It's like what can you do? The mind is an antenna. Your eyes are a gift that the species must one day learn to open. So these power archetypes in ideological systems, I mean, something I'm inspired to say now is Victor Hugo has this quote where he says nothing is more powerful, this European writer, he says nothing is more powerful than an idea in which its time has come. What does that mean? That means it's like a Steve Jobs moment. It's like a Genghis Khan moment. I mean, take away the story, like the, if you take it as the value in the eyes of the human being, it is engaging with an influential event. And I feel really, it's not that people on this planet want attention. They want to know their attention. Because think about it, when you know how to drive a car and you see a nice vehicle, you get in that vehicle and you enjoy it. You know how to use it. But if you go and use something you don't know how to use it, that means you don't even understand the value of it to extract joy. Do you know, a lot of it's like the issue is not that people's happiness is something you got to find. Happiness is a mode of perception. It's a mode of perception when you see that there's a greater than sign towards the okay than the not okay. Because really, on some very profound level, if you hear this idea, just look at how I'm saying it. Nobody knows. Listen again. Nobody knows. Matter is the paint. It is not the paintbrush. The mind is the data processor. But it's processing data not just in regards to objective phenomena, but also the imagination. So I would say that if I'm saying words and these words are appearing as images to you, whoever's listening, you can say that that is a stream of data, as if it's like I'm a breeze and a part of the weather, you know? Power, or a time where the event is taking place, that's the spirit of nature. That means, imagine somebody back in the day, you were a native child of a native tribe, let's say, native tribe with a unique, tribal metaphysics, shamanic metaphysics, let's say, and you went to the shaman and you're like, I saw something, you know, I saw something, I found the spirit of nature. Then the shaman comes and says, "Oh, nice, you found the spirit of nature. Okay, what did the spirit of nature tell you?" And then the kid looks at it. It's like, wait a minute. And the spirit of nature speaks. That's the thing. Speech is provided by the space of our attention. That means someone can be speaking to you, and if your attention is somewhere else, that person is speaking in their own room, and little do they know. You know what it is? It's like talking to someone. I had this experience once. Someone I cared for, I went and explained something to them because I felt like it would be an advantage to them if they knew it. And then after me explaining it, then I was like, this person is in a totally different room. And then at the end of it, the person was like, okay, like the person had no comment, as if the person, there was a glass. There was a glass between us. The person could see me, but the person couldn't see what was being said. For example, Henry David Thoreau has this quote. He says, "It's not what you're looking at that matters. It's what you see." That means, let's say someone is crying. Okay, someone is crying, and you look at that and you're like, oh no, this person is crying. Do you know? So it's like you've looked at it's as Henry David Thoreau says, it's not what you're looking at that matters. So if you take what you're looking at as the most important thing, you don't see the other dimensions, and you might suddenly see that person has to cry it out. So Brian says, I hear shaman in my head every day. Listen, the inner realms move. Your inner realms are like language. If you identify with it, then sure, we can say that's a psychological condition. But if you don't identify with it, there's a lot of ideas that appear in the mind of the human being. The human being just doesn't identify with it. You know? Imagine you're a master painter and somebody comes and says, hey man, learn how to hold a brush. You know? And so imagine someone says that, right? But because you know what is really the ability, you don't get offended by it. It was what, I forget his name. What was his name? Oh, there was this Navy SEAL. There was this Navy SEAL on the Joe Rogan podcast. But then this video I'm talking about was something I saw in his own podcast, where he was saying that this young kid had come to this Navy SEAL and was like, what do I do when kids intimidate me? You know? And the Navy SEAL told him, train jujitsu. And the person was, why? You know, and he told the kids, because, not because you can fight them, not because you learn jujitsu so you have a bigger stick than them and you go hit them in the head. You learn jujitsu so you don't get intimidated. You can control yourself. You know how to move. You know how to be an able creature. Do you know? But it doesn't mean you use it. And if they want to fight you, the Navy SEAL was telling the kid, if they want to fight you, you just tell them, let's go to the jiu-jitsu ring. And you make them tap out. The idea was, instead of being like our savage ancestors, even if we want to be violent and fight, be violent at a higher stage of the intellect. Not at a savageness where we can break ourselves. In the future, I would like to see these booths, these like booths in the city, where when two people get angry, imagine their cars crash and they want to fight like they do in like developing countries. In developing countries, literally it's like a video game, you know? It's like two cars crash and then you suddenly hear a voice, Mortal Kombat! You know? That's third world country, you know, developing country problems, you know? Just, you know, two cars just slightly graze each other and a Mortal Kombat fatality deathmatch begins. So the Navy SEAL was telling that kid, discover your own ability and then introduce to the world to a higher evolution of its style. Because if a person is alive and doing the same thing as people did back in the day, then why are you alive? Huh? What's new? What's the point of you being born if we're trying to be clones of our past? This is why, for me, novelty. Novelty is the word that's children should be running in the streets shouting at one another. Novelty, novelty. And people are going to be like, what does that mean? And it means the new is here. That the new was an opportunity to see things differently. Because at the end of the day, it's so easy. It's like they're telling the person, it's like, hey man, why aren't you motivated? He's like, because it's just atoms in empty space. What do you want me to do? You know? And you see, no. It's a rare opportunity for atoms in empty space to be more than atoms. It is your birthright to see the new dimensions of your own eyes. And if you identify with language and shape, sure, you could be anything. You can identify, literally, language is like clothing for the mind. It's like when I see people walking in the street, I'm not joking, guys, seriously. When I see human beings, when I look at their minds, for me, it's like I see a matrix screen, but I just don't understand what the code is. The code for the human mind is language. You want to know how we're programmed? It's the stories we're told growing up. It's not just the parents of the child that spoon-feed it. Every environment and experience is sculpting some part of your inner constitution. Because if you choose to not value your individuality, I don't even know how you understand your collectivity. All those people who feel there's a oneness and the ego should be destroyed, like you should be egoless 24/7. It's like you haven't. I don't think that's a full comprehension of the collective wisdom. Because the purpose of the collective is the individual. The purpose of the individual is the collective. Where else can these positions go? These archetypal positions go. Where else can they go? What else can happen? Right now, if, let's say we're all 8 billion just complete materialists. So how many eons? How many eons is it just going to be atoms in space, or is there going to be art? Is there going to be some sort of revolutionary movement in the psyche? For me, it's about creating greater games. Because all life appears as a game. Anybody who says it's not a game hasn't understood individual consciousness. But it's a game where there is two value systems. That means if you are weak, the world defines you. If you understand who you are, you define yourself. But you also comprehend that this self is conditional. That means you're a good person as long as you continue doing good. You're suddenly, when you do something bad, you're like a bad person. Until you suddenly do something good, you're a good person. So what are you? Are you really good or bad? Or are these just interpretations of specific actions in space and time? For me, it's nobody is good or bad. Good and bad is where your attention is and how much you're life sensitive. The neo-morality is going to be based on life sensitivity on a human dimension. Do you know what happened? This event that's happening with George Floyd is very revolutionary. People don't realize it because it was a unique event where people all around the world also saw the horror. You know? So it was a human dimension. That means a human being on some part of the planet saw that video and was like, holy shit, that's a human being there. Do you see what I mean? We are stepping beyond class, color, creed. We are becoming human for once. And that's the only thing your civilization asks. Just be human while you're here. Don't try to run away to another dimension. Don't try to be something unnatural. Be human while humanity breathes. That's the only game. There is nothing else to do on this rock in the middle of nowhere. It's like the person looked at their watch and they're like, what time could it possibly be on a sphere in a vacuum? Do you see how much of the world is self-built? And how much of the self depends on the world? It's like the ultimate mystical question in regards to an archetype design basis, at least to the idea of the mystic. What happens? What's the point? What is the peak? What is the peak of attention to the immaterial? And this question, only through a certain poetic writing of mine, I managed to find some sort of resolution to it. That once you reach the peak, at the top of the mountain peak of your evolution, and you get that view, the journey after that, the next peak is the sky, where you cannot walk into the sky. You have to fly into the sky. That means I honestly feel this thing that people feel they have attained some sort of ultimatum and oneness. What can I say? The only honorable thing is to see how far we can go. There's no greater honor. The violent don't see the future. The passive don't see the future. The weak don't see the future. The fearful don't see the future. The shy do not see the future. The emotional do not see the future. Sometimes emotionally you can be the future, but I wouldn't say you see it. You know who sees the future? The future. That means people have automatically been defined by the past based on the natural design and linearity of time. People, they're telling them, be in the present, be in the here and now. New Age communities like here and now, be here and now, be here and now. You know? It's like, honestly, if you gotta say be here and now, you haven't understood that everything is already here and now. You know? But anyways, the idea is, you don't have time for fear. You don't have time to be that which you are not. There is a freedom in not resisting the world. And I hope you find it. Much blessings, guys. That's the end of the talk. I'm going to share a Discord link, and instead of typing, anybody has a question, they can join Discord. And I guess one last thing to say about ideological systems. We can't ignore ideas. They are tools, they're technology. You know, just like a person uses a phone, a person uses this approach to look at life and see the implication of different phenomena in ideological classifications. Ideology is like the inner realms, and the way you can comprehend the inner realms and the outer realms is that we look at matter and we're like, yeah, matter looks pretty much in like objective and in a singular dimension. But when we look at the mind, which sees multiple possibilities to a movement before it does it, that's like suggesting the mind is not singular. So it's as if we have multidimensional minds, but localized through singular bodies. You know. So it's just language. It had emerged artificially. Now it's becoming hollow to again emerge naturally. And I feel there will be natural languages. You see, I mean, language is a very tricky thing because various contributions have influenced it, you know, and there's various bias to it. That means, like, some people, like you can say certain linguistic professors, they see that, for example, Sanskrit is a very complex language, and it's a language where in back in the day in traditions they would say it's the language of the light beings, you know. For example, there was a view on language like that. There was a view on, for example, different languages, different cultures, and it's like the metaphysics, the mythology, all psychological, like this. It's as if like the psychological experiences of people also wanted to live through the words. Do you know? That means probably a guy named Tim created the word time. He's like, yeah, okay, yeah, you know, I'm the first guy giving this a name. Let me, you know, it's like when Tim created time. Oh man, Can you imagine the name Tim comes from time? Imagine it's the other way. You know, there's this trend going on with uh, incredible people in Silicon Valley naming their kids based on technology. You know, imagine naming your child Engine. And I was thinking that there's a strangeness that you should give the child a normal middle name. Then give the child a normal first name and give the child like a unique middle name. You know. So imagine naming your child like first name regular name, middle name aerodynamics, and then regular last name. Your child's middle name is aerodynamics. You know, just to keep concepts alive in history. You know? Anyways, guys, I'm going to share the Discord link. I'll see you there. Thanks for tuning in. This is the end of the talk. Blessings. You know, guys, sorry, before I end off, I wanted to say imagine naming your child Zeus or Thor or Odin and then shouting at your child, like, Odin, go to bed! Or like, Zeus, go to bed! You know? Or naming your son Thor and your son's playing with a hammer. It's like, let go of that hammer, son. It's let go of that hammer, Thor. Sorry, guys, just being playful here. Anyways, thanks for tuning in.